Welcome back to the broadcast. This is the second hour of Citizen Extra, live on Citizen TV. My name is Wahiga Mwaura. As always, we enjoy and need your feedback about some of the topics we're discussing in studio. Talk to us, 22422. I'll be sampling some of your feedback a bit later on. You can also talk to us on social media at Citizen TV Kenya on Twitter, and of course Citizen TV on Facebook as well. Well, as we mentioned earlier, the High Court is currently having a ruling that's expected concerning the publication of guidelines on the complementary system of identifying voters and transmission of results should the integrated electoral system fail. We cross over to the High Court now and listen in as that ruling continues.
The elections using the electronic system alone. The court in the relevant part stated, and I quote, "In a republic, elections are a matter for the entire people and a joint concern of all citizens. Consequently, the monitoring of the election procedure must also be a matter for a task of the citizen. Each citizen must be able to comprehend and verify the central steps in the elections reliably and without any special prior technical knowledge. The public nature of the elections is also anchored in the principle of the rule of law. The public nature of the state's exercise of power, which is based on the rule of laws, serves its transparency and controllability. It is contingent on the citizen being able to perceive acts of the state bodies. This also applies as to the activities of the election bodies. The principle of the public nature of elections requires that all essential steps in the elections are subject to public examinability unless other constitutional interests justify an exception. Particular significance attaches here to the monitoring of the Election Act and to the ascertainment of the election result. An election procedure in which the voter cannot reliably comprehend whether his or her vote is unfalsifiably recorded and included in the ascertainment of the election results, and how the total votes cast are assigned and counted, excludes central elements of the election procedure from public monitoring and hence does not comply with the constitutional requirements. Despite the considerable value attaching to the constitutional principle of the public nature of elections, it does not ensue from this principle that all acts in connection with the ascertainment of the election result must take place with the involvement of the public, so that a well-founded trust in the correctness of the elections can be created. It further stated that it is certainly ensured in these cases that the voters are in charge of their ballot and that the result of the election can be reliably checked by the election authorities or by interested citizens without any special prior technical knowledge. Whether there are still other technical possibilities which create trust on the part of the electorate in the correctness of the proceedings in ascertaining the election result based on verifiability, and which hence comply with the principle of the public nature of elections, need not be decided here. Restrictions on possibilities for citizens to monitor the election events cannot be compensated for by sample devices in the context of the type approved procedure or TIN, the selection of the voting machines specifically used in the elections prior to their deployment being subjected to verification by an official institution as to their technical performance. The monitoring of the essential steps in the election promotes well-founded trust in the correctness of the election, certainly in the necessary manner that the citizen himself or herself can reliably verify the election event. For this reason, a comprehensive bundle of other technical and organizational security measures, for example, monitoring and safekeeping of the voting machines, comparability of the devices used with an officially checked sample at any time, criminal liability in respect of election falsifications, and local organization of the elections, is also not suited by itself to compensate for a lack of controllability of the essential steps in the election procedure by the citizen. Accordingly, neither participation by the interested public in procedures of the examination or approval of voting machines, nor a publication of examination reports or construction characteristics, including the source code of the software with computer-controlled voting machines, makes a major contribution towards ensuring the constitutionally required level of controllability and verification of the election events. Technical examinations and official approval procedures, which in any case can only be expertly evaluated by interested specialists, relate to a stage in the proceedings which is far in advance of the ballot. The participation of the public in order to achieve the required reliable monitoring of the election events is hence likely to require other additional precautions. End of quote. A report titled Implementing and Overseeing Electronic Voting and Counting Technologies on Electronic Voting in the Netherlands, commissioned by the National Democratic Institute and the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, concluded that electronic voting was unreliable. As a result, MOKIR, the body mandated to deal with elections in the Netherlands, decided that paper ballots were the preferred mode of voting. See page 273 of the report. Electronic voting was not sufficiently transparent and verifiable, as there was no way of determining whether votes had been accurately recorded or stored. The constitutional right of citizens to vote and elect their leaders is guaranteed in Article 38, Sub-Article 2 and 3 of our Constitution. The Court of Swaziland, in the case of Zwen and 262 others versus Elections and Boundaries Commission and another, had this to say of the right to vote. Section 85(1) of the Constitution of the Kingdom of Swaziland Act No. 1 of 2005 postulates, subject to the provision of this Constitution, every Swazi or person in Swaziland has a right to vote at any election of members of the House or members of the Bukfo. From the above constitutional right emanates the principles of election, which are well defined in De Villiers versus Lou, cited with approval in Beckman versus Minister of the Interior and others. I quote, "It is after all in the public interest that every person whose name is on the voters' list shall record his vote, and the policy of the Act is to give every voter the opportunity of voting whether he can be present at the poll or not. The Act and the regulations are mainly concerned with two cardinal principles in connection with an election, one being that it shall be by secret ballot, and the other being that a person who records a vote is a person of that name and no other appearing on the voters' list." End of quote. The IBC has a constitutional duty under Article 86 of the Constitution to ensure that at every election, A, whatever voting method is used, the system is simple, accurate, verifiable, secure, accountable, and transparent. B, the votes cast are counted, tabulated, and the results announced promptly by the presiding officer at each polling station. C, the results from the polling stations are openly and accurately collated and promptly announced by the returning officer. D, appropriate structures and mechanisms to eliminate electoral malpractice are in place, including the safekeeping of election materials. The process of accounting and verification in an election is closely intertwined with the concept of transparency and accountability. This promotes free and fair elections. Any electoral regulations should therefore ensure that only registered voters who present themselves at a polling station participate in the poll, and that each vote is accounted for. I now invite my brother, Justice Mabea, to take over from there.
We shall now turn to the issues we framed earlier. We shall deal first with the question of locus of the petitioner. Learned counsel for the second interested party, Mr. Ahmed Nasir, appearing with Mr. Macharia, submitted that although the petitioner is a legal person, it lacks capacity to present a constitutional petition. He submitted that a constitutional petition for enforcement of the Bill of Rights can only be lodged by a human person. The petition, on the other hand, is a conglomeration of political parties. Counsel further submitted that the petitioner only cited Articles 36 and 38 of the Constitution, and that there was no averment that the rights under those articles had been breached. On his part, Mr. Mwangi, learned counsel for the petitioner, submitted that under Article 2 of the Constitution, any party is at liberty to present a petition on behalf of another. He submitted further that Article 260 defines a person to include a company or association. Article 22 of the Constitution provides as follows: every person has the right to institute court proceedings claiming that a right or fundamental freedom in the Bill of Rights has been denied, violated, or infringed, or is threatened. Article 260 on its part provides inter alia, quote, a person includes a company, association, or other body of persons, whether incorporated or unincorporated, close the quotes. The petitioner describes itself in the petition as a coalition of several political parties in Kenya with a substantial voter support base. To our minds, a conglomeration of political parties answers to the description of an incorporated body of persons under Article 260. Mr. Ahmed Nasir himself admitted that the petitioner had elsewhere been held to be a legal person. That being the case, we hold that the petitioner has a legal standing to bring these proceedings. The second interested party objects to the petition on the basis that the petition does not satisfy the requirements of a constitutional petition, properly so called. It was submitted that the petition did not precisely set out the rights under the Bill of Rights that had been breached. The petitioner did not address this issue. The principles governing the position with which a constitutional petition should be pleaded were well stated in the Anarita Karemi Njeru versus Republic case of 1979. The petitioner should specifically set out the provisions of the Constitution that are alleged to have been violated, provide the particulars of the alleged violation, and how the respondent has violated those rights. This position has been reiterated in the Martin Nyaga Wambura and others versus the Speaker case of 2014, and the Mumu Matemu versus Trusted Society of Human Rights Alliance and others 2013. In the Mumu Matemu case, the Court of Appeal observed as follows, quote, quote, we cannot but emphasize the importance of precise claims in due process, substantive justice, and the exercise of jurisdiction by a court. In essence, due process, substantive justice, and the exercise of jurisdiction are a function of precise legal and factual claims. However, we also note that precision is not conterminous with exactitude. It is stated, although precision must remain a requirement as it is important, it demands neither formulaic prescription of the factual claims nor formalistic utterances of the constitutional provisions alleged to have been violated. We speak particularly knowing that the whole action of pleadings, hearing, submissions, and judicial decision is to define issues in litigation and adjudication, and to demand exactitude ex ante is to miss the point. In our view, it is a misconception to claim, as it has been in the recent times with increased frequency, that compliance with the rules of procedure is antithetical to Article 159 of the Constitution and the overriding objective principle under Sections 1A and 1B of the Civil Procedure Act. Procedure is also a handmaiden of just determination of cases. Cases cannot be dealt with justly unless the parties and the court know the issues in controversy. Pleadings assist in that regard and are a tenet of substantive justice, as they give fair notice to the other party. The principle in the Anarita Karimi Njeru case that established that the rule that requires reasonable precision in framing of issues in constitutional petition is an extension of that principle, close the quotes. In the present case, The heading of the petition cites Articles 10, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 162, 2B, 258, and 259 of the Constitution. In addition, it is stated that it was a matter for enforcement of the fundamental rights enshrined under Articles 21, 24, 25, 26, 10, 36, 38, 81, 82, 2, 86, 88, and 232 of the Constitution. However, in the body of the petitioner did not plead with exactitude the particular rights or freedoms that had been breached or were likely to be violated by the respondent. What the petitioner pleaded loosely was that Article 38(2) of the Constitution guarantees the right to free, fair, and regular elections. That Articles 81 and 86 directs the respondent to ensure that whatever method or system used for election is simple, accurate, verifiable, secure, transparent, and accountable. That such electoral mechanism was to be established by way of regulations within 60 days before the general election and only with the approval of Parliament. The petitioner then concluded that the respondent had not established a mechanism to meet the constitutional and statutory threshold of simplicity, accuracy, verifiability, security, accountability, and transparency. This was then followed by the prayers for the three declarations. With the greatest respect to the drafters of the petition, it falls far short of the test set in the Anarita Karimi Njeru case as to precise pleading of the rights violated. To our minds, the petitioner did not plead that any of the fundamental rights had been breached or was about to be violated. It was left to this court to gather from the supporting affidavit and two supplementary affidavits of Norman Magaya of 12th and 17th July respectively to establish what the petitioner's complaint was. Accordingly, it is our determination that the petition dated the 29th of June 2017 did not satisfy the criteria of a constitutional petition for enforcement of fundamental rights and freedoms. It is because of the imprecise manner in which the petitioner's claim was pleaded in the petition that counsel for the respondent and the interested parties objected to certain submissions by Professor Sihanya. They argued that the petition was mutating. We nevertheless allowed Professor Sihanya to address us on the objected matters, but directed that we shall rule on them in this judgment. After carefully analyzing the supporting and supplementary affidavits, we have established that the petitioner's complaint is as following. That although Articles 81 and 86 of the Constitution requires the respondent to establish an electoral system that is simple, accurate, verifiable, and transparent, and that although Section 44A of the Elections Act provides for a complementary mechanism for identification of voters and transmission of election results, the respondent had failed to establish the same less than 30 days to the next general election. Since counsel for all the parties ably addressed us on the matter, we see no prejudice suffered, and we shall therefore proceed to make our determination on the matter. The next issue relates to the electoral system obtaining in Kenya. The electoral system and processes are underpinned by Chapter 7 of the Constitution. As already stated, the net effect of Articles 81, 82, and 86 of the Constitution is that the electoral system to be put in place should be simple, accurate, verifiable, secure, transparent, and accountable. This is captured in Sections 39 and 44 of the Elections Act. We have already set out above those provisions of the Constitution as well as the Act. Under Sections 39 and 44 of the Act, the use of technology in our electoral system is entrenched. Registration of voters, their identification at the point of voting, and the transmission of election results is purely electronic. However, the actual voting, tallying and collecting of votes is wholly manual. Unlike in the 2013 general elections, when the use of technology was left to the discretion of the respondent, Section 44 of the Act, which was introduced by the amendments made in 2016 and 2017 respectively, establishes an integrated electronic electoral system that enables biometric voter registration, electronic voter identification, and electronic transmission of results. Section 44(2) of the Act requires the respondent to procure and put in place the technology necessary for the conduct of a general election at least 120 days before the elections, and to test, verify, and deploy such technology at least 60 days before the general election. This is to be undertaken in a consultative manner and through regulations that have been approved by Parliament within 30 days of that section coming into force. The respondent has so far complied with the requirement by dint of the Elections General Regulations 2012 as subsequently amended and culminating with the latest amendments contained in the legal notice number 72 of 21st of April 2017. Accordingly, the legal regime obtaining in this country at the moment in the electoral system requires an integrated electronic system that enables biometric voter registration, electronic voter identification, and electronic transmission of results. This leads us to the question whether the respondent has developed a complementary mechanism under Section 44A of the Act. The petitioner contended that pursuant to the Election Laws Amendment Act No. 1 of 2017, Section 44 of the Act was amended.
Well, live images there from the Milimani Law Courts where a ruling on the IBC backup system is currently going on. We'll be taking you back there shortly. But for now, let's switch gears and discuss a topic that has dominated conversation around elections this time round, the reality of fake news, of course popularized by American President Donald Trump, and it's made its way here to Kenya. And to help me discuss this topic, let me introduce my panel. A few changes here. We still retain Mark Bichachi, political analyst. We carry on with this discussion, but we are now joined by James Madhai, Partnerships Director, Bloggers Association of Kenya, also known as BAKE. In addition, John Murunga, Client Service Manager, Geopol. They've carried out an interesting study that I'll be telling you about shortly, and Onchari Oyeyo, a researcher at the Center for African Progress. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a new study reveals that Kenyans have seen or heard false news about the 2017 general election, with 87% reporting instances of deliberately false or fake news, deliberately false rather, or fake news. We unpack these numbers and look at the implications shortly. Let me start by taking a look at some of the results that came out of that study. The reality of fake news in Kenya is the name of this study. It was polled on 2,000 Kenyans. A series of questions were asked to them about their consumption of news during May 2017. Let me refer to what's on the screen now. 90% of those who are polled, or 90% of the 2,000 or more, of course they are here to tell us more about how they did that study, suspect having seen false or inaccurate news about the election, while 87% suspect having seen deliberately inaccurate news about the election. Worrying news indeed, and we'll be asking more questions about that. Now, this poll also unearthed other realities about where Kenyans are getting their news from. Another question they asked Kenyans is, which is their most trusted news source, even as we get closer and closer to the August 8th polls. And this is how they responded. TV at the top, followed by radio, and then the newspapers. Social media, this is Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, comes in at number 4. Community leaders who at one point were at the very top of this list are now closer to the bottom. And family and friends who, many believe are very influential on how people vote are at the very bottom of this table. Wow, interesting statistics there that we need to take a look at. We also have one other study that was carried out. Let's put that on the screen, of part of this whole study, but this is other information that came out. Now, this is statistics on the range of sources being referenced for general election news. So you can see some differences with what we saw on the previous page. This time round, whereas TV was trusted in the previous one, nevertheless radio is what is most listened to or referenced to at 55% of those who are asked. TV comes in at 50%. Social media here has risen to 49%. The newspapers are at 37%. Interestingly, compared to trusted, newspaper is trusted over social media, but social media is referenced more than the newspaper. Interesting to note there. And friends and family versus community leaders has also changed, whereas community leaders are more trusted than friends or family. Nevertheless, friends and family are more listened to in terms of a range of sources being referenced to than community leaders. Of course, we'll begin by focusing on fake news, and I'll start with John Murunga, Client Service Manager, Geopol, to tell us, as you carried out this poll, John, and of course welcome to the program, are you able to tell us how did you define fake news for those whom you polled before you asked them the various questions?
Thank you very much, Wahiga. We define fake news as deliberately spread deliberately false information. Okay. When we're actually asking questions in the questionnaire, we do not pose the questions to the respondents as, have you seen fake news, but we ask them, have you seen deliberately false news on the various channels out there.
Okay.
Yes.
And okay, so fake news now is a big term that is used to describe propaganda or everything that you would put in that particular category. Now, is it possible that fake news was already a part of our conversation around elections? It's just that now it has been given a title. I mean, I remember during post-election violence in 2007, SMS is circulating that would predict certain events happening. Those events would not happen. Is fake news just a new name given to a very old phenomenon?
Actually, that's a very one of the things that we actually noted, that Kenyans are very attuned to fake news. And when you look at our history and the way elections have been conducted in the country, we also noticed that a lot of what you actually call fake news has actually been a phenomenon that has been with us for a long time. Just that, of course, after the US elections, we got this term fake news, but I think it's part and parcel of our society. And if you look at the levels at which Kenyans are tuned to this, compared to probably even other markets like Europe and the US, you actually see that Kenyans, we are a little more keen on fake news, and we are able to actually decipher this compared to other markets globally. Okay, before I bring in the rest of the panel to respond to this, are you able to explain to us briefly how you carried out this poll and what measures you took in place to ensure that you got accurate information and etc.? Yes, the data collection methodology that we use as Geopol is we use quantitative SMS based survey. We have a database of respondents across Kenya. Currently it's about 8 million Kenyans. So we randomly selected these respondents from our database, and the survey was sent to them via SMS, and we got feedback from them again through the same means. Okay, I've seen people on certain interviews asking how come they never get called for these polls. We won't talk about that right now. Yes, that's a discussion for another day. Let me bring in James Badai for this. And James, I want to hear from you. Are you surprised by the findings of that particular poll? Are you surprised that 90% of Kenyans suspect, or 90% of those polled suspect having seen false, inaccurate news about the election?
Okay, slight correction. My name is Wa Madai.
Wa Madai. I beg your pardon. Carry on.
The thing about it is, first, I agree with the gentleman from Geopol that fake news is not a new phenomenon at all. It has been with us for a very, very long time. I think one of the things that we need to appreciate now is that the rate at which fake news is propagated is extremely high, and the reason for that is, of course, the internet, and actually the platform that is being used to spread this fake news and basically propaganda and all that stuff is WhatsApp. And the thing about WhatsApp is that it's dark social, so you can't tell where some of these things are coming from, and also we don't know the statistics of how many people read, but it's extremely crucial. It's extremely crucial for that to be started because we have about 22 million Kenyans online, and 10 million of them are on WhatsApp.
10 million of them are on WhatsApp. My goodness. What is are you able to give us an idea of what you feel the impact of fake news has been on the election so far? Just from what you've seen online, what sort of conversations are Kenyans having around this election, and how are they able to decipher what is fake news and what isn't?
So we are in unprecedented territory here. And the thing about it is, first the election will be closely contested, and then also the flow of information because of the internet. I mean, in 2013 I think we had about probably around 10 million Kenyans. Now we have 22 million Kenyans online. Double that. And so the internet has just changed how information is being spread in this particular instance. So there are two things that are happening. First, false information is spreading like wildfire, and then number two, the next thing that is happening is that people are consuming it, not knowing whether it's true, and they're consuming it from that perspective. However, something that has happened, some institutions, for instance, the IBC, I want to commend them because there was some fake news that were targeting them, and they were very, very quick. They were very, very quick, to counteract that. And and the thing about it is, they spread it in very bite-sized information, very bite-sized chunks that could be easily shared on WhatsApp, and I saw it in about five WhatsApp groups that I was in. I think the thing about it is, there's a problem. People are consuming this content. Sometimes they are believing it, but it's being counteracted by the truth, sometimes not as fast as it should be. But I think some organization and other people, actors in this space need to invest in resources, so that they can be able to counteract very quickly. Also, something else I need to mention is that there are a lot of mercenaries. There are a lot of mercenaries producing content, targeting. For instance, I've seen a lot of material, targeting Raila Odinga, for instance, on Facebook, on YouTube. There's even a whole website targeting that. The thing that is really dangerous, because when you think about it, these are people who are targeting your psyche. For instance, if you don't like a certain thing that this person did, they can create information come up with information so that you can hate this person, and it's very dangerous.
Okay, let me also bring in Onchari Oyeyo into the broadcast as well. Thank you for joining us. Your reaction to this report?
Well, thank you so much, Maura. Now, number one, I'd like to agree with I think the first part of the report where they talk about the number of Kenyans who suspect to, come across fake news. 90% I think is more realistic.
Okay.
Yeah, and when it comes to the source that is trusted by most Kenyans, of course, as the source of trusted information, I don't think TV could rank as high as they've gotten at. I'd trust a family.
You're disputing a bit of that.
Yes, I think my family member, let's say my dad or my mom, can be a trusted source of information compared to TV. That is for me, and I think that is true for a good number of Kenyans. And the problem is, nowadays in Kenya, whether it's a newspaper that is of course ranked at the top in terms of circulation, the established media in terms of newspapers or TV, still you can access information that is not reliable. What it does is actually it spreads this information to a wider section of society, and that creates a problem now. So I couldn't say TV is the most trusted source of information. That is for me.
Even though you're on TV right now.
Well, I have to be, Trump is always on TV, and yet he came out and said fake news. He branded CNN fake news. Look at what happened yesterday in the court. Guys, politicians manufactured propaganda. Propaganda was picked by news people and published. The same newspapers were cut and then presented to court as evidence. Fake news. That is why part of the case, of course, collapsed. So I couldn't say TV is the most trusted source of information.
Okay.
So for the number of Kenyans who claim to have seen fake news, 90% is realistic.
It's realistic for you. Mark doesn't seem to agree much with you. Mark, go ahead.
I think the good gentleman is a bit misguided. There's a difference between confidence and influence. Now, the truth of the matter is your mother will naturally influence you more than TV, but TV will always inform you more than your mother. This is the realities of life. And there's also an aspect of fake news that is peculiar to the Kenyan nation. It is called the fake prophetic. Every time we have elections, there's always a prophecy as to what will happen if Raila becomes president or if Uhuru becomes president, and when it happens, it's a total opposite. Now, that underlying need for the Kenyan voter to believe in divine intervention in the electoral process is what actually is in the underlying driver of fake news, because then you're looking for information above and beyond what is based on fact. And that is why we try and create names like Joshua and Baba and Tamaki and all these things to sort of enshrine how divine these particular people and officers are. Now, the thing that gives fake news such power is that it then plays into our fears and our subconscious reliance on the divine to make our political decisions. That is also influenced by our tribe. So you'll find that if fake news plays into your belief of what a particular tribe or a particular person is, then it's more likely to be believed. So the reality of the matter is this: the media as a whole has a key difference between social media, in the sense that it has editors. Okay, now those editors are charged with being gatekeepers of what the news is supposed to be. So in general, what people consider as fact, even in the United States of America, comes from registered news sources. Now there are secondary news sources that are called fake news websites and even news channels in the States, where they take a particular position and push their partisan agenda from that perspective. Kenya has not gotten to the point where we can clearly say say that a certain media house is totally about one side. I'll tell you that because I'm an analyst and I've been to almost all the key media houses. So the reality of the matter is Kenya is not at the space where our media houses can be, especially TV and print, can be specifically be mentioned to say they are completely fake news. They've not gotten there yet. But on the online space, there are lots of people who are generating content that plays into, number one, the religiosity of Kenyans, the tribalism of Kenyans, and the perceived perceptions we have of the candidates we like or we don't like, and that is what is propagating the fake news.
Okay, John, let me quote something in the report and see if you can be able to further elaborate this for us. In the report, Alan Kamau, head of Portland, is quoted as stating that Kenyans are well attuned to spotting false information. Respondents cited conflicting data, controversial messages, and biased reporting as the top 3 factors that led them to suspect that something is false. Wouldn't you say that that's good news, that Kenyans are aware of what to look out for when consuming their news and thus are able to spot fake news from real news?
Yes, yes and no. One is the good news is yes, that Kenyans are attuned to this, and probably it's something that has been driven by our history. The other challenge is that in as much as Kenyans are attuned to this, there is still a segment that may fall gullible to this information that is out there that is not correct.
Okay.
And from the survey, we actually found that about 4 in every 10 Kenyans actually say they don't have confidence that they are able to get accurate information that will make, allow them to have an informed decision in the coming election. So there's still a segment that will be affected whichever way you look at it.
What exactly limits or holds back? So basically you say that 6 out of 10 of those polled are able to access all the information that they need. 4 out of 10 are not. Did they give any reasons why? Do they have any specifics?
No, we don't dwell into the specific of why they're not, but you could actually see that one of the things, of course, is the noise that comes from fake news, because the moment you see information from one news outlet, what they normally do and what every other Kenyan does is to look for the information on a different news outlets, just to see if at all they can corroborate and see if at all the information is true or not. So that whole process of doing the corroboration, depends with an individual. So you actually find cases where, if that doesn't happen, then they're actually susceptible to false information.
Okay. Well, I'll have to interrupt this broadcast briefly because InfoTrack Research are releasing a poll on Meru, Kajiado, and Kisii County. They'll be telling us a little bit about what information they've gotten about the gubernatorial race, senatorial race, women rep race as well. Let's listen in to that. We'll carry on with this discussion after that.
The next governor for Meru. So it's a wait and see thing. We are going to see because Kiraitu Murungi is a veteran politician for Meru. We also know that Peter Munye is very vocal. He's the former chair for the COG. So we're going to wait and see. And I'm sure they're going to see this. They're going to see that there is 6% of their voters across both that have not made up their mind. So those are the findings for the gubernatorial seat. So we go to the senator seat and the women rep. So the question was again the same. Assuming the elections for Meru Senator were to be held today, which aspirant would you vote for? For the senatorial position, 54.4% would vote for Honorable Midhika Linturi, who is vying with the Jubilee ticket. The second, at 20.6%, is Imanyara Mugambi of PNU. There is Itewa Zablon, 1.5%. There is Duranira G. Gitonga at 1.4%. There is Gideon with DP 0.9%. Maranya Jafet 0.8%. And the Mwiti Kadendu 0.2%. Yes. There is a whopping 20.3% of voters in Meru who have not yet made their mind on who they would vote for. And so, though the margin between the first, the most popular, and the second is still big, it is still important for the senatorial aspirants in that county to know and to convince the remaining 20.3% undecided voters. And if you compare that with the governor seat, it's only 6.8% who have not made up their mind on who they would vote as their governor. But when it comes to senator, there's work to be done, 20.3%. So to their first 3 or 2, Linturi and Imanyara, they need to convince the 20.3% that they deserve to be the next senator for Meru. And then We're going to look into the women's rep position. So assuming the elections for Meru Senator, or for Meru, sorry, that's a typo, women rep were to be held today, which aspirant would you vote for? So who is the most popular aspirant? 44.6% of the respondents said they would vote for the incumbent. Yeah, they would give her a second chance, Florence Kajuju, who is vying with Jubilee Party. 41.2% would vote for Kawera Mwangaza, who is an independent candidate. Kailemia Elizabeth with PNU, Isaiah Catherine Kagwiria with MCCP, Kenya Susan with KANU 0.5%, Kenya Betsy with ODM 0.1%, undecided 9.7%. Again, it is a close contest, or I don't know, it's a tight race between the incumbent Florence Kajuju and Kawera Mwangaza. You can see the difference between Kajuju Florence and Kawera is it's less than 55%. And you can see 9.7% of the voters have not yet made up their mind of who they're going to vote. So we'll wait to see who will carry the day, or who will manage to convince the 9.7 undecided voters. So it's at this point, with less than 20 days to the general election, it is not clear who will become the second women rep, whether Kajuju will retain her seat or it will be taken by an independent candidate, who is Kawera Mwangaza. And we go to the demographics. There they are: the age, the gender, employment, marital status, level of education, and religion. Yeah, those are the numbers. And the cameraman usually tell me to give them like 5 seconds. They go through the demographics, and then you can tell me when you're ready, I move on. We can move to the next county, which is Kajiado. So we have the findings for Kajiado County, and the interviews were conducted between the same time. We conducted the interviews around the same time, and we conducted 750 interviews through face-to-face CAPI interviews. And this is representative of 401,577 Kajiado County registered voters. This sample translates into a margin of error of plus or minus 3.6 at a confidence level of 95%. The sample represents the 5 constituencies, and the sample was selected from the 25 wards of Kajiado County. Again, Again, we were guided by the number of registered voters from the 2017 IEBC voter register. Yeah, that's it. I think I read when I had not displayed that, so you can see. So Kajiado has 25 wards, 5 constituencies. We also call them sub-counties, and all the wards were represented by the 750 respondents that we interviewed. So that is the distribution going by the number of registered voters in the IEBC 2017 register. So what are the findings? So the question was the same. Assuming the elections for Kajiado governor were to be held today, which candidate would you vote for? 52.7% would vote for the incumbent governor, David Olekedianye. We have a Masai here. I hope you may pronounce the name Nafa. David Olekedianye of ODM with 52.7%, followed by Joseph Kolelenku, who is vying with the Jubilee ticket at 41.0%. Daniel Nina Livondo, who is vying with PNU, is getting 3.4%, and their undecided voters are 2.9%. Yeah, everybody responded to that question, you can see, and here represent the number of.
Live images there as Infotrack releases a popularity survey. We'll be taking you back there to continue listening in, but we interrupt that for another live broadcast, of course, from the High Court, where we are informed that an entire petition regarding the IBC backup system has been dismissed. What this effectively means is that the court has disagreed with the submissions by NASA that elections should be postponed if one system failed. Bearing in mind today, this was concerning the publication of guidelines on the complementary system of identifying voters and transmission of results should the integrated electoral system fail. The High Court has agreed with the IBC in terms of how the IBC has set up its system. Let's listen in even as those rulings or that ruling continues.
About the remarks on the application.
My Lord, it may very well be true that in the pleadings there was no reference to postponement, but I sat here, maybe unintended. He did actually say that the election be postponed. It may have been a slip of the tongue, and I would then want to appreciate that that be recorded as such. But it's not correct to say that it was never stated at all. The unfortunate thing is that these things are not recorded, so the toing and froing will not be useful. Let us accept it as he has stated it.
Any comment by the Honorable Attorney General, Mr. Mantila, we have Mr. Jitenji.
Yes, Your Lordship.
Anything to say?
I concur with the sentiments.
Mr. Mashari?
Well, I think as the learned professor has said, I too was in court. And I distinctly remember not only hearing but also making notes about it. My learned colleague, Mr. Mwangi, did advert to the postponement of elections on the basis of Section 55. But even as the professor says, he has had time to rethink his position. I'm happy with that. We all want elections on the 8th of August.
My Lord.
Yes, Mr.
Just wish to reiterate, I'm very confident about the submissions I made before this court. I'm very surprised that the respondents' counsels are playing politics with my statements, and the mere mention of Section 55B is the one that puts the legal parameters in which that statement was made, and all of them are referring to Section 55B. I was just reiterating my position and to state I'm very confident about what we had said.
Is it your position, Mr. Coleman, that during your address to us, you never mentioned Section 55B?
I am saying I mentioned Section 55B. Any attempt to take my statement outside the ambit of Section 55B is political. But everything I said must be mentioned within the aspect of what are the parameters mentioned by Section 55B, and our submissions were purely on Section 55B.
It is not truly material to the determination that we have made, because we are determining the three players in the petition before the court. But the record for all the three judges speaks well for itself. And we are in Mr. Monan to be saying that the IBC should not pretend that there is nothing that we can do. And that is the point at which you say, if there is a problem,
if there is a failure,
then there will be Section 55B to fall back on.
Precisely, my Lord.
Now, if that were to happen, for example, and we need not engage in this debate here, then, of course, the election under constituency or county would be stopped. Isn't that what you're saying?
Would be postponed. My Lord, for 55B to even kick into place, the election would have taken off. 55B does not apply until election day. The election date, whole election will have taken off on the 8th for even 55B to be contemplated. So that is why I'm saying that the moment we mention 55B, it is done in contemplation of the fact that an election will be taking place on that day.
So once you read the full text of our judgment, you will satisfy yourself as to whether we made proper statements of the law, whether we captured your submissions properly or not.
Most obliged, my lord.
Thank you, Mr. Mwangi. If it switches you, you'll note that the media briefing that is to be given by the court to the members of the fourth estate is drawn directly from the wording of our determination in the relevant paragraphs.
and does not go any further than that. With regard to your prayers, this is our short order. The record of the court speaks for itself, and that should address the concerns of Mr. Mwangi. We note that the petitioner is entitled to appeal as a matter of right, but since there is a prayer for such leave, we grant the petitioner leave to appeal. The petitioner shall be supplied with copies of the judgment of the court made on the 21st of July 2017, as well as the proceedings before the court immediately and in any event before the end of the day, but upon payment of any necessary court fees. It is so ordered. We thank you all. There being no other matter, the court will now adjourn.
There are live images from the High Court. What I can let you know as of now is that NASA's petition for the publication of guidelines on the complementary system of identifying voters and transmission of results should the electoral integrated system fail has been dismissed by the court. Kimondo there being the presiding judge. Just a few quotes from that particular court ruling. We find that the respondents have put in place the right mechanism as required by the Constitution, and further IBC has put in place right alternative mechanisms to support the electronic system under regulations. In addition, the court has ruled that they disagree with the submissions by NASA that elections should be postponed if the system was to fail. Every citizen has a right to be registered as a voter and to vote. Entire petition is dismissed. And NASA has responded. They say that they will appeal the judgment, and they also say that we did not say that elections should be postponed if we don't have an electronic system in place. Rather, we said that the election should be postponed if the system fails on the polling day. So it's important to get that right. NASA have responded and said we did not say that elections should be postponed if the electronic system is in place. We said the election should be postponed if the system fails on the polling day. That is a bit of what happened at the High Court during that particular ruling on the IBC backup system. Of course, we'll have more details regarding this in our 1 p.m. broadcast with Fred Indimuli. But for now, that brings us to the end of the second hour of Citizen Extra. We'll be revisiting the topic of fake news when we return. But for now, we take a short break.